All right, well, thank you for making your way back. Sure we're all full now, but we got a nice and riveting presentation coming up by Mr. Brad Warren. Brad Warren is CEO of Global Ocean Health, a Seattle-based nonprofit research and education organization founded in 1994. The organization is known for organizing multidisciplinary initiatives to strengthen the hand of tribes and fishing communities working to protect the sea's ability to make dinner. Over decades, tribal leaders have pulled GOH up from the waterline to support collaborative problem-solving initiatives on land, pointing out that the best solutions tackle pollution where it starts, often transforming waste to useful products. Commissioned by Tulalip tribes, Warren helped Washington tribes redesign the policy that became the nation's most ambitious price and invest law for reducing carbon pollution, Washington's Climate Commitment Act. In its first 3 years, the law raised more than $4.3 billion for climate-related investments, reserving a minimum of 10% of investments for tribally endorsed projects. GOH's Forest Biomass Learning Network provides a forum for tribal managers, researchers, and practitioners to assess emerging options to monetize timber slash and advance tribal goals by contributing to soil health, crop and forest productivity, water purification and pollution remediation, carbon sequestration, and other purposes. Brad Warren.
Thank you, Sean. All right. Can you all hear me okay? Thank you for putting up with the length of that bio. That was longer than it ought to be. And this is too, so I really am going to try to squeeze and shorten as I go. This is a little background on us. I think you got enough. The basics is that we started out as an organization working in fisheries. A lot of that was with tribes going back even before we formed 45 years ago. Some of the tribal leaders started taking me under wing. What we found was that they were simply the best at looking after the resource, and they're the best because they're the most committed. And when it comes down to putting Humpty Dumpty back together again in a broken landscape, which is what you got to do to keep it making fish in a salmon environment, they're just the best. And so we kept working with them. This is Terry Williams, and with him is Francesca Hillary. She's from Round Valley. Terry is the late head of most things in natural resources and treaty rights at Tulalip. He died a couple of years ago. Terry was one of the mentors for me and for Francesca. She's on our team. Terry asked us to launch what became our main program. It's called Partnerships for Tribal Carbon Solutions, and it's focused on supporting tribes to accelerate the curve to get into leadership in a new class of carbon activities, not just the offset markets that everybody's familiar with that pay on the tens of dollars per ton kind of price, but the carbon removal market, which asks for much greater durability and pays for it, about 10 times more. And that market presents both risk and potential benefits for tribes. It could become a land rush and lead to all the usual problems with industrial development, or it could be useful to tribes. And Terry's view was, let's get ahead of it and guide it so we can live with it. So we got a lot of our inspiration for the way we do this from things the tribes are doing. This is a picture of Terry, his brother Daryl, and a farmer. They co-built a project with Tulalip, funded and jointly operates it with the farmers. It's a dairy digester. And what's interesting about this is that it's an approach to a biomass waste stream that converts it from a nuisance, a sort of source of water pollution and operating costs that were backbreaking for the farmers. And it turned it into a profit center for the farmers and the tribe. They make energy, they make fertilizers, they make soil amendments. In the process, they all but eliminate the methane emissions. They also solved the water pollution problem that had been a source of huge conflict between the tribes and the farmers. It was lawsuit after lawsuit. The tribes won every round and got nothing for it because the farmers were all going broke. They were going broke largely from managing poop. And they figured out, why don't we learn how to turn that into a resource? And it's working to this day. This is a tour of that facility that we put together at a time when people were using this to learn about how to approach carbon removal in tribal leadership. A bunch of tribal leaders came. You can see the picture. I'll go into the details on it later. You can get a copy of this online if you want all of it. Here is the origin of this project that we're here to talk about. Is the Forest Biomass Learning Network. It really got started because we heard members of ITC and tribes we knew saying, we have all these forests and we have to manage them, we have to defuel them, and then we have piles of scrap wood and slash that there's no market, it's really hard to figure out what to do with it, we wind up burning it. And that's, not everybody's burning it, some people are doing other things, but a lot of people are doing that, and it's not a satisfactory answer. So we started asking, what if tribes could help fund their stewardship by tapping into this carbon removal market that pays more, by tapping into biomass markets that convert waste to products. There's a bunch of new approaches to that emerging. There's competition for biomass taking place. There's a market. Is it worth getting involved in? Does it make sense? And that's an individual tribal decision, of course. I wanted to give a quick explanation of the difference between carbon dioxide removal and the offset market that people are much more familiar with. It's been around since the 80s. Offsets typically are going to last for decades. They're typically going to pay you, depending on the system you get into, somewhere between around $7 and $30. At the high end, you can get up to 50, 60 sometimes in US dollars. Occasionally, there's a better price, usually for more complex reasons like you heard about from our friends at NIC, where there's a premium paid for social and biodiversity benefits. But typically, that's the price. By comparison, the low end of the carbon removal market is 100-year duration, not decades, but hundreds. And the target for most of the high-end buyers is give me 1,000 years or longer, give me geologic time, and I will pay you for that. That's they'll give you prices that are typically in the hundreds for most of that. The low end is about 61 bucks. And a difference that's important here is that in principle, and not everybody agrees about this stuff, most things here have some sort of slop and mush in the way that the categories work. There's blurring of the lines going on. But the view of most people who are experts and practitioners in carbon removal is that the target is the mess we've already made. They call it legacy emissions. That's on the order of 1.5 trillion tons of carbon already in the air. And then you look at what's going on in offsets. You're offsetting tomorrow's emissions, the ones we haven't made yet. And that difference is really a philosophical matter. We've made so much mess now that if we don't go about bringing a mop and bucket to it, we will never get to a kind of future that makes sense for most of the things we depend on in this world. We also have to do clean energy. We also have to do emissions reduction. The IPCC and the other major scientific authorities have really said you got to do both. Removals are meant to address the mop and bucket part of that. This is a little bit of a look at the price structure in the market where this part of it sits. The highest paid forms of carbon removal, and it says a lot about how the buyers are thinking. They pay for things that stick it in rocks. It's geology. They pay the best prices. $1,300 in the ocean. You're basically turning it into minerals in the ocean. Biomass geologic sequestration. That's something that maybe there's a case that you guys at Leech Lake could get into that, but that can pay on the order of $400 a ton. You go down through the sort of the slope of different options. The lowest paying options, and at this point the biggest of all the ways of doing durable carbon removal, it gets paid that kind of money. The lowest end of it is biochar. and that's paying around $140 a ton for the carbon credits for it. And then you have direct biomass storage, which is bury it, and that's also even cheaper. That's a new entrant, and there's not very much of it going on yet. The permitting hassles are out of this world. So the biomass parts of this pay less than the parts that turn carbon into rock. That's really worth noting. And then you go all the way down to here on the right side, and you've got forest and prairie carbon projects. These are your standard offsets that everybody already knows about. They're going to pay you somewhere between 10 and $30 a ton most of the time, sometimes more. It's a much easier path to walk. There are well-developed protocols for getting projects verified, and you don't get as much. That slope, one of our intentions is to help tribes clamber up into the higher end of the market and get access to markets that right now look at them and saying, you're doing ecosystem projects. We don't think that's storage. We think that's flux. We're not interested. And we're saying sometimes it's, you're right. And there are occasions when tribes are achieving really long-lasting sinks, as you guys might be with your project at Leech Lake with wood sinking in the fen. Those kinds of projects might blend this nature-based approach that's very widespread in Indian country and the kind of durability that these guys are willing to pay a lot more for. So I'll push forward. That's probably what have I done? Okay, yeah, there we go. We built the Forest Biomass Learning Network with a bunch of partners, these 4 organizations along the bottom. The funding that supported that has now wrapped. We're supporting it from reserve funds we had in-house at the moment, and we're raising new money to keep it going. The function of it is to provide a way for tribes to explore their options in this field and how to either harvest that waste and turn it into, if it's a waste, sometimes it's an intentional deposition of tree litter into the forest floor. But if it's simply being treated as a waste and they got to get rid of it so it doesn't make a worse fire, then the biomass markets, the carbon removal markets might offer some options that are worth learning about. The Learning Network centers on that. This is still going. We'll keep it going through the summer, maybe into the fall on the reserve funds, and we're looking for new funds to keep it going. For tribes, it's a way to learn about all this. That we bring in biomass companies and carbon removal companies and researchers and other people working in the field, and we address questions of what are the practical options, what are the kinds of biomass projects you can do, what are the kinds of carbon projects, what are the policy and regulatory issues, what kind of monitoring does it take, what sort of commitment. And here's a list of some of the people who've spoken. Folks, Brian Van Stippen, who's here from NICC, has been one of them. I'm not going to go through all of these today. I'm going to sort of cut this short. But a few things that I want to point out where we'll highlight and spend a little time with Yosemite Clean Energy, Calusa, which is a tribal energy development company, the remediators, and actually it fell off the bottom of the screen. There's another outfit. It's quite interesting. And a few details that we'll get into. I'll try to skip over a lot of the slides just to keep it shorter. So a bunch of participants from, so far 36 tribes have participated, 43 tribal members and staff, leaders from a bunch of these tribes and more. Each session, it's been meeting roughly monthly. Sometimes we stretch it out to quarterly if everybody's busy. And it's a 2-hour session hosted on Zoom. Typically, there's a couple of speakers in the first hour, and then there's a moderated discussion. A lot of the learning is in the discussion. Some of the early takeaways from the process is that the biochar market is evolving. This has gone from a market where people who make biochar could sell the stuff, the physical product, for as much as 600 to 1,200 bucks a ton in the California market. And those prices nationwide have fallen because the carbon removal market showed up and said, we'll give you 120 to 150 bucks a ton for that. And so suddenly that's what the biochar is worth. This is an unintended and kind of negative effect for producers, but it's real. It produced a lot of volume. It produced enough to change the market, and it's pushed biochar producers to start evolving and producing more products and different things that can drive value so they're not just dependent on one product, which is an approach we found out is, in principle, makes a lot of sense. It's not always easy to pull off. But if you can have diversity of products, you're better off, you're more flexible. So some are producing multiple markets, some are going after the general direction of almost a biohub style management approach, where you combine a bunch of operations in one facility so you can make multiple products and have combined heat and power and things where you get more efficiencies. There are instances where if somebody's in a local market with like a really wealthy ski resort community that can support a great sustained price for the biochar they produce, and those folks are still okay. But in most of the rest of the markets, the price has gotten too low. It costs more to make this stuff than you can get selling it. It can be 250 to 500 bucks a ton commonly. It's sometimes more like 1,000 just to make it. And those numbers kind of matter when you can only get, top end 250 and often much less when you sell it. Another of the lessons related to this is that the production methods for biochar matter, how you produce it. We looked at mobile, we compared it to fixed, centralized facilities. And to be honest, there are advantages to both. In remote and rough terrain, you pretty much have no choice. Mobile is where you have to go. What's been missing from the mobile market in most cases is high efficiency production. It's both labor intensive, so you spend a lot on the crew that tends the machine. You don't get very much production out of it because you're doing small plots and small volumes through these little trailer-borne kilns. The second thing is that the processes themselves are usually designed more to combust the fuel than to pyrolyze it and turn it into biochar. They're different. Pyrolysis that makes biochar is actually an oxygen-deprived heat experience for the wood. It does not give it an oxygen-fueled combustion. It gives it a change that allows you to free things from it, including interesting materials you can find other values for. We'll get to that. But if you don't have a means of capturing that stuff, and you're using your basic approach, like these open top flame cap burners and air burners and things, these are good products for their intended purpose. They're not really that great at making biochar. So they're inefficient, and a lot of your feedstock goes to waste. Here, if you look at fixed products, fixed facilities, some of them are semi-transportable. An outfit called Takachar makes this thing you see on the upper right. It's portable on a truck. It's not as easy as a trailer-borne thing, but you can haul it around if you're on a road system. And then there's kind of big industrial scale things. An outfit in Tennessee called Aries Clean Energy is an example of it. They actually turn bio materials, scrap wood, treated sewage, all kinds of waste. They turn it into biochar, and they also make energy in the form of, I think it's syngas is what they produce out of this stuff. It's a viable industrial fuel. A thing to be noted here is that, and I'll do this comparison, under notes on the right, you can see at the bottom, there's a piece on what you can potentially earn based on a study at the bottom. It's a biochar carbon credit market analysis and from 2022. And they were looking mostly at California, but the numbers are roughly similar across most of the country. They concluded that under sort of realistic pricing scenarios, the potentially most profitable thing, not guaranteed, to make money, would be a fixed facility that combines making power and making biochar. That's something you need a fixed facility to do. You could conceivably adapt one of these truck loadable systems for it, but you just can't adapt essentially a burn barrel or a trench burner to do that. So if you're going ultra mobile, you're foregoing the potential to turn it into potentially a more profitable operation. It's not zero prospects. This is just more modest. It's in some cases a mobile project can pay for itself and earn a little more. Again, for us, the question we were trying to ask is, do you get to pay for your stewardship work doing this? You want it to earn a little bit if that's what you're up to. There were a string of other things that we found were takeaways, none of which will surprise anybody here. The real bottlenecks aren't just technical, they're economic, regulatory, and organizational. I won't even go through all the fine print. Permitting and regulatory complexity remains a big barrier to all of this, especially in biochar. If you're going to do something that falls under air pollution rules in a lot of states, that's a lot of red tape. There's obviously no single answer to the question of what to do with your slash. People are going to come up with different answers depending on where they are and what they need to do. Measurement, verification, market design, these are still weak links. There's a lot of work to be done, especially at the high end of the market. This is not a mature market yet. It's going to be a bumpy and uncertain ride. It could be worth pursuing, but it's not the easy road. For tribal participants, sovereignty and the co-benefits to the community are not really side issues. They're central. That's always been true. Everybody here knows that. It applies here too. So a few things that we sampled, and I'll go through this really quickly. One of the presenters was Allison Wolf from Vibrant Planet, which is a data analysis firm helping people do really better wildfire management and the stewardship that goes with it. They actually became the winners of an X Prize at the beginning of this year for this work with the Kalispel tribe in Washington to develop an AI-assisted data system to help tribes figure out their options and get ahead of fire management. Wildfire management is a real driver in a lot of places and not so much in a few. It's been a major part of the conversation we've been entering. Again, this theme keeps coming up that you're better off if you can to figure out how to make multiple products so you have flexible options and you can sell. If the market for one goes down, you can find another one to sell to it's got some strength. Some of the options, you can make quite a variety of materials. You can do woody biomass burial, you can make building materials, there's activated carbon, very high-end market, very consolidated and difficult to get into. But if people start penetrating that market, you're looking at prices of about $6,500 a ton. It's worth some attention. Bio-oil is another market, bioenergy with carbon capture, biochar combined with that, on and on. There actually are more options. There's many, many uses for woody biomass. There are markets forming around this. In the bioenergy world, people are actively competing for biomass from the woods. And bioenergy companies showed up at our meetings sometimes just because they heard about it. And they thought maybe we'll learn how to work with tribes who can supply us with something. And that's, that doesn't mean it's necessarily the way to go. It just means there's interest there. You have to make that decision for your own, of course, for your own tribe's interests. There are all these paths in carbon storage. I won't go into the details. Some of them are making bricks and building material. You can inject it into deep geologic formations. You can bury it. There's much more to be said. Jeffrey Brown from Nature Focus spoke about some of the work they're doing. This is one of their projects in Canada. In general, they work in a way very much like we do and NICC does to support tribal self-determination in forestry. In general in land management. For biomass burial, this is some of the things it can look like. You're literally digging a hole and throw it in there. There are some options where it's sealed up and placed in a extremely durable form where bacteria can't get at it. It's never going to decay. Sometimes, as you heard about in the fen that Leech Lake is looking at using, it's already an anoxic environment. It's not going to have much decomposition. Those are cases where you can get very long-lasting and potentially very valuable storage. I don't think people are getting the full value out of it. I think that part of the reason is the market doesn't know how to see it yet. So that's an issue we're working on. It's actually a research project we got going, how to verify it so the market can see it. I'm going to skip over this. There's an awful lot of material if you want it. This will be available for anyone who wants it afterwards. Really, this is just an illustration of one of the ways of combining the pyrolysis system that makes biochar with systems that also make gas that can be burned for heat energy. That's one of the systems. That's what that outfit in Tennessee is doing. Many people are doing different methods of this. These are two different scales of operation, essentially a burn barrel with a little bit of a cap on it, and then a much more controlled operation. Some of these systems are designed to start going farther and make multiple products. We'll go into that in a minute. I'll skip over this. This is an outfit called Yosemite Clean Energy. They're up by Yosemite in California. They're using a European process that extracts green hydrogen and renewable natural gas from wood waste. This is a path that's one of the options. They've got several projects up and running, and if you're in a position where that's of interest, they're one of the places that's relatively local in the U.S. market. More on them. I'll skip through that. More. This is I'll skip through that. So a little bit here. In Alaska, there are about 50 rural communities that have some form of wood biomass energy system. 24 are native villages. They're doing everything from heating greenhouses to heating municipal buildings that the tribal offices are in and the schools. In remote communities, biomass energy really has a lot of appeal, as you guys know well. You've got extremely high fuel prices in a lot of these places, especially Alaska, and headed higher by all accounts. You've got unreliable supply chains. And in those cases, if you want to keep grandma from freezing, sometimes it's a good idea to get hold of your local biomass and use it. And there's a surprising amount of it, even in pretty far north Arctic communities. They've often got willow they can use, and a lot of them are doing that. This is an outfit called Calusa Indian Energy, a tribal enterprise of the, I'm going to mispronounce this, I'm sure, Kashil Band of Winton Indians of the Calusa Rancheria. And if anybody here knows how to pronounce that better, please tell me. I don't have it yet. They have an energy enterprise that does some very interesting work. They've built their own microgrid that supports stable power at their casino. It's been uninterrupted for 14 years. And even where they are, which is a reasonably reliable grid, that's no interruptions for 14 years means something. For people who run casinos, it means a lot. Every one of them contains its own internal data center. And if it has downtime, they're hosed. So downtime's the last thing they want. And so these kind of microgrids work in that context. They work in many others. They're good for keeping the power on. They also do solar. They do a bunch of biomass projects, and they help other tribes expedite projects they want to move using tribal authorities. It's actually a direct use of tribes' powers to get things done. So they're an interesting outfit. How are we doing on time? 15 minutes. Okay. I'll scurry through and try to cut this even shorter. Mino's another outfit that's making biochar. I won't go into the detail. This is some of it. Wood waste to water treatment. You can use it for water treatment and to remediate toxins going into creeks. Howard Sprouse from the Remediators gave a wonderful talk on that. You can make construction materials out of it. Some of them are kind of surprising. I'll save the details for later. There's lignin is one of the products extracted from wood and typically just incinerated or landfilled. It turns out to be quite valuable as a means of making packaging, and a lot of other things can be a plastic replacement. There's a lot of multi-output systems being developed, some very interesting ones. They produce many different things. It's easier to do these things if you're close to a mill or a source of waste wood somehow. It's not a prerequisite, it's just easier. This is an outfit in Montana called Regenitech. CEO is Michael Smith. He came from computing and technology. And he developed this system that's kind of a computer-controlled three-part system. It does pyrolysis to make biochar and some byproducts and heat in the beginning. Then it pumps that heat, so that's the pyrolyzer, pumps it into a system that grows algae. The algae allows them to complement what they get from the wood and get some other nutrients and valuable molecular signaling things that tell plants to grow. So it's a growth stimulant as well as a nutrient source. They're growing some quite valuable algae, and the algae are common food supplements. And if they sold them into food value markets, they'd be comparable to what you get for selling wild salmon. They don't. Instead, they go another step. They go to step 3. They put it in a digester. And they make a series of soil amendments and plant growth stimulants. They inject that material back into the biochar they produce and make a more valuable biochar. And their grow juice sells for around $75 a gallon, which is better than high-end wine at the farm gate. And it gives you room to make mistakes and learn on the fly. It's not too bad. So it's a very interesting model. I don't know how there's what it looks like. I don't know how much people want to do it because it's complicated. But it can give you quite a few options, more even than they've bothered to show. We had a talk from a guy named Jim Archuleta, who was a U.S. Forest Service guy for a long time, now a biomass utilization expert, on some of the pathways and obstacles. Very interesting guy and a good advisor. Peter Mayer, an attorney who works on biochar permitting, a lot on the regulatory reforms that are starting to take form. A few places are learning how to cut the red tape and get it done. Many are still really struggling with it. And I'm going to stop there and say that really, I thank you for taking the time, for showing up after lunch. I haven't seen any or heard anybody starting to snore yet. I'm grateful. And do we have time for questions?
Yeah, we got some time. We have about 10 minutes for questions.
All right.
Does anyone have any questions? And then remember, just state your name, affiliation, and carry on.
Mick Wheaton with Twin Oak Indian Nation and the Free Cell Section League. I was just curious for using timber resources for the bioenergy production in particular. What's a typical conversion rate? Like how many tons of wood produces a given megawatt of energy? like trying to plan out, hey, if this is the resource we have, like what percentage of it would we be able to say if we could put into this market?
Yeah, I don't know that number off the top of my head, but I'm flipping back to a reference that we included here. And it's, I believe it's in there. This is this study in California that looked at the biochar carbon credit market analysis at 2022. And I can share that with you in detail if you want. I believe they got into that there. And others have too. It's probably no single number, right? It's going to depend on how you configure the system and what you're trying to make out of it, and what your feedstock is, and whether you dry it first. And if you dry it, what's that cost you? It starts to affect your margin. One of the advantages of being near a mill is that a lot of that's happening without you having to bother. You can get their scraps. You know, does Quinault have a mill? I can't remember. Yeah, okay. So, you know, it's an irony of an age where a lot of people think we should get beyond timber, but without it, it's really hard to make a lot of things work. You get the logistics, you get the economics, everything sweetens. And it's in a world where the timber economy is collapsing. All the alternative uses that you would think would take over have a harder time getting started. It's an interesting challenge, and we're in the middle of it. Vince, you've probably dealt with this more than anybody else here. Did you want to add anything to this?
It all just depends how many megawatts you want to put together, and if you can dry it, it's better, that's for sure.
Yeah.
Your margins.
Yeah. And, you know, the path to putting together a new timber economy that works for tribes and what they want to do is it's not black and white. It's not one size fits all. And I think we're all in the middle of it. And this is we're all learning together. So it's a great question. I'll give you what we got, and as we learn more, I'll share that with you too. Be happy to set up a conversation to follow up.
I have a question. Zach Wilson, forest ecologist from the Great Lakes Indian Fish and Wildlife Commission. So very interesting presentation. This is really close to home for our tribes in Wisconsin, Minnesota, Michigan. There's a proposal for a sustainable aviation fuels project to make biofuels, but one of the things that our tribes are looking at is the safeguards, the guidance documents to help guide the product, the fiber, where it's coming from. This particular project has European standards that allow them or deter them for using round wood that would normally go to pulp mills. So we're looking at just top/branches. And I'm just wondering, like, if there's any recommendations or guidelines, because they're old that we have here, and it seems like this is moving so fast that we can't keep up with the protections of protecting our soils and other forest stuff. For us, coarse woody habitat, not debris, or coarse woody material is really missing in our forest. So those are some of our concerns.
Yeah. I mean, I think you raise a great point. And to that question about what guardrails and standards already exist in the market, some of the high-end carbon removal buyers have adopted a standard that says no growing for fuel. This has to be waste. And others have gone even farther. There's a standard that the Allen Foundation has embraced in their approach to what they define as natural carbon solutions. And they rule out anything that removes biomass from the land. And what's interesting about that is it's obviously well suited to a condition like yours. You've got a situation where that rule makes sense to you, and it fits your landscape. There are landscapes where that rule makes people kind of wince. It's like, have you ever been to fire country? Do you realize what happens to that biomass if we don't get rid of it? Are you willing to fight that fire with us? Do you come down out of that ivory tower? You know, I mean, so in the West especially, I think that rule which is a little bit one size fits all, doesn't make as much sense.
So just to counter, we're not in an ivory tower. We're in an ecosystem that has been heavily managed for 100 years badly.
Yeah.
Our forests don't have wood on the floor. Our clan animal, American martin or Wabaseshi, needs coarse woody habitat forests. That's what's missing, and yet now we're dealing with agencies and industries that are going to take the last little bit of it. And the guidelines that had tried involvement, leave 30%, were changed at the state level to 10%. And even that is I mean, there's a serious soil concern, there's a habitat concern, small mammals, climate change. Yes, you're completely right. West is not east, and south is not north, but those are really big hurdles that this new industry has got to address.
Yeah.
For tribes to buy in.
It is a really good point you're making, and I think it's one of the very fact that you make it proves something that kind of matters here. As a society, writ large, we're lucky that there are 574 federally recognized tribes, and who knows how many that aren't doing the work to make this stick. Because without them, this recognition of a really heterogeneous landscape with different needs, there'd be nobody. The other people who might do it don't know enough and don't have the capacity. And so it's like good on you. Vince.
This is Correa with Northwest Management. You guys have a real strong pulp market here, and that's why the forest is clean. The pulp business is going under, particularly in the West. We're losing all our pulp facilities. Nobody's going to build a new pulp facility. That's $1 billion, and water is an issue. And so what's happening a lot in other parts of the country is there is nowhere to send the residuals. Sawdust, chips, it doesn't matter. And you can't run a sawmill very long if you can't get rid of the residuals, because you're going to have a mountain of biomass there with nowhere to put it. And they try to put it on the soil and put it in the agriculture, but it's a lot. And it's a lot. So that there is some real, and that's a great point, there is some real significant differences even in our industries, and particularly in the West. So that's one of the reasons this is getting so much traction right now, is because there is millions of tons of biomass that really pretty soon is not going to have a home. And so that's why people are trying to figure out where to put it.
I completely agree. I think that it's already gone. We already don't have a market. But in this particular situation, in the United States, from what I understand, that this product is going to be, sustainable aviation fuel that Germany is buying, because they mandated that their fuel has to be a certain percentage. So it's going to be put in tankers, shipped to Germany, which then you're questioning your sustainability part. And their standards say we can't use round wood. I think that would be a totally different game, and I think tribes would be okay, or more okay, if we could use that pulp, aspen, soft fiber, but this handcuffs us to just slash, because the paper mills still want their cheap product. So I think the bigger question is the United States needs to put some mandates that, hey, by this target, we should have sustainable aviation fuel so we can burn it, use it locally, which we don't have, I think, right now. Europe is buying this fuel. So I think, it would be a much different story if we could use our aspen pulp versus the slash that's the soil.
Yeah, that's a great conversation, everyone. We're going to have to get it moving. So one more time for Brad Warren.